silencio y todos los emails, Let's go. Todavía. Yep, go.
Welcome to Decarbonize Puerto Rico. My name's Doug Davis. Hola, ni hao, privyet, hello, good day. We're really excited to bring this live event to you today. We've got a wonderful cast of speakers that are experts in their field. We're not going to share the lengthy bios. They're all on either a Facebook page or a LinkedIn page for Decarbonize Puerto Rico. Please invite your friends. This will be available to watch in the future, and we hope to hold other events on this important issue of decarbonizing. There's one thing we've learned this past year is that we're all connected. And whether it's through public health or energy or global trade or even global travel, it's really important that we all share this common goal of decarbonization. So with that, we're really thrilled to have the new Secretary of State of Puerto Rico, Larry Selheimer, who's been a public servant and a real leader here on the island with regards to energy. He's an engineer, and with that, I'd like to introduce you to our Secretary of State.
A todos los participantes, conferenciantes, personas insertadas en este gran evento de Decarbonize Puerto Rico. En particular, quiero agradecer al presidente de CESA, de Solar and Energy Storage Association of Puerto Rico, al señor P.J. Wilson, y a todos los coordinadores y conferenciantes del evento. El asunto de cambio climático ya no se trata de un debate de percepción o de interpretación. Se trata de una cuestión científica, con datos científicos, pero con una perspectiva de vida. Para poder entender un poco, y sé que muchos de ustedes dominan esta materia, debo hacer un breve trasfondo de cómo es que llegamos a estas conclusiones y a estos criterios y parámetros establecidos para atender el asunto de cambio climático. Para el 1988, las Naciones Unidas crea el Panel Intergubernamental de Cambio Climático, conocido por su sigla en inglés, el PICC, y está compuesto por cientos de múltiples países utilizando los científicos de su primer orden. Ya para el 1995, en la cumbre de Madrid, se aprobó la comisión para investigar lo que es el asunto del cambio climático. Ya 20 años más tarde, en el 2007, en su cuarto informe, se resumió a través de miles de estudios en 20 años y de observaciones científicas lo que es un asunto categórico, que el cambio climático y el calentamiento global es inequívoco. Fue aprobado el informe línea por línea. En el 2013 se determina categóricamente la causa del calentamiento global y del cambio climático por ser lo que se llama un elemento, un factor antropogénico, o sea, causado por el hombre. El 2014 se hace un reporte, una synthesis report se llama, y me parece que es exactamente el espíritu de este evento. Y ese reporte dice, cut carbon pollution sharply starting right now at very low cost or risk severe, pervasive and irreversible impacts for people and our ecosystems. Ese fue el reporte del 2014. Así que en el 2018, ya apenas hace par de años, se establece como un umbral de tratar de evitar que para el 2030 se alcance un incremento en el calentamiento de la Tierra de 1.5 grados. Y había dicho en la introducción que el calentamiento global y el cambio climático no es un asunto de interpretación, de perspectiva, de percepción, sino de data científica. Y quiero compartir estos datos que realmente manifiestan lo que está ocurriendo en el planeta Tierra. En los pasados, desde el 1900 al presente, el planeta Tierra ha incrementado en casi 1.5 grados Fahrenheit, que es 0.85 grados centígrados. Pero ese 0.85 grados centígrados de incremento en la temperatura de la Tierra ocurre en su mayor incremento durante los pasados 40 años. Para que tengan una idea de cómo es que está el planeta Tierra calentándose, tomó 11.000 años incrementar 1 grado centígrado en la temperatura de la Tierra, lo que ha ocurrido en los pasados 100 años. El elemento, ¿verdad?, el factor más significativo en lo que es el calentamiento global son los gases de efecto invernadero. Y los gases de efecto invernadero, particularmente el que mayor causa daño hace, es el dióxido de carbono. Las emisiones del dióxido de carbono se miden en partes por millón. Así que para el año 1970, las emisiones de dióxido de carbono eran de 325 partes por millón. Antes, en la era preindustrial, era de 280 partes por millón. En el 2017 se alcanzó una concentración de 410 partes por millón. Para que tengan una idea de qué se trata, 400 partes por millón no se había logrado a ese número hace millones de años. Así que eso realmente manifiesta cómo es que el globo terráqueo se está calentando. Siendo el dióxido de carbono el gas primario de efecto invernadero, es el que en Puerto Rico tenemos que atender de inmediato. Y el 90% de esas emisiones de CO2 son como resultado de la quema de combustibles fósiles, llámese carbón, petróleo o gas natural. Entre las datas que se ha arrojado, que están en lo que se llama el Puerto Rico Greenhouse Gas Baseline Report de Climate Change Council, nos arroja unas cifras bien preocupantes. Si lo comparamos con Estados Unidos, las emisiones de gases con efecto invernadero en Puerto Rico aumentaron más rápidamente en Puerto Rico que el promedio de los Estados Unidos para el año 2005. Para que tengan una idea, desde el intervalo del 1990 al 2005, Puerto Rico incrementó a una proporción de 80%, mientras en Estados Unidos fue a una proporción de 16%. ¿Y cuáles son las principales fuentes de emisión en Puerto Rico de gases de efecto invernadero? El sector de energía eléctrica, el de transportación y también el sector industrial. Las cifras, ¿verdad?, de la generación de electricidad en Puerto Rico con combustibles fósiles, se habla de un 98%, puede ser que ahora esté en un 96%, pero aún estamos bien lejos de lo que es una generación limpia. Y tenemos que, obviamente, movernos en esa dirección. De ese 96%, 98%, pues el 50%, tan reciente como hace unos años atrás, era de petróleo, un 30% de gas natural y un 15% de carbón. ¿Y qué de nosotros podemos hacer como gobierno? Pues nosotros tenemos que asumir no tan solo la obligación legal, moral, económica y social de formular un plan de mitigación, de adaptación y resiliencia al cambio climático. Y a esos fines, al amparo de la Ley 33, que fue el proyecto del Senado 773 de la autoría de este servidor, se establece, ¿verdad?, lo que es la ley y el plan, la ley de cambio climático, el plan de mitigación. La Ley 33 del 2019, conocida como la Ley de Mitigación, de Adaptación y Resiliencia al Cambio Climático. Establece la política pública. ¿Qué política pública? Es promover sistemas de energías renovables o alternativas más eficientes para mejorar así la eficiencia energética en Puerto Rico. Reducir dramáticamente las emisiones de gases de efecto invernadero en los diferentes sectores, ¿verdad? Energía, transportación, industria, agricultura. Entre otras cosas, ¿verdad? Como guías a ese plan que tiene que elaborarse, se hace un mandato de que toda la flota vehicular del servicio público del gobierno de Puerto Rico sea ya sea con método alterno o con combustibles no fósiles. Uno de los parámetros para esa ley es que el uso de energía renovable debe tener el siguiente portafolio. 2022 debemos alcanzar un 25%. Para el 2025, un 40% de generación con fuentes de energía renovable, un 60% para el 2040 y el 2050. En el 2050, Puerto Rico tenga la capacidad de generar el 100% de sus fuentes de energía a través de métodos limpios, renovables y ecoamigables. Para el 2035 debemos reducir un 40% los gases de efecto invernadero. Y entonces, la Ley 33 crea un comité de expertos, personas puertorriqueñas y puertorriqueños que dominan la materia, que conocen de las diferentes vertientes que el cambio climático y el calentamiento global afecta a nuestra isla. Y ese comité de expertos domina lo que es zona costera, recursos de agua, lo que es la educación, meteorología, lo que es asuntos de energía limpia, energía renovable. Y se crean estas personas, estas 9 personas, 6 expertos y 3 miembros del gobierno de Puerto Rico para diseñar, para confeccionar lo que es el plan que por mandato de ley tenemos que ejecutar y que tenemos que implementar en Puerto Rico. Ese comité de expertos estará radicando su plan de mitigación, de adaptación y resiliencia a la Asamblea Legislativa. La Asamblea Legislativa, tanto Cámara y Senado, tienen que componer lo que es una comisión conjunta de 7 miembros de ambos cuerpos para recibir el informe, evaluarlo, analizarlo, aprobarlo en ambos cuerpos y con la firma del gobernador Pedro Pierluisi, que está totalmente comprometido, y dentro de su plan de trabajo, de su plataforma de gobierno, está el asunto de atender lo que es el cambio climático y el calentamiento global. Así que felicito a todos los que dan esta lucha, porque se trata de nosotros dejarle a las futuras generaciones una isla habitable, una isla limpia, una isla en la cual podamos todos disfrutar. Es el mejor legado que le podemos dar a Puerto Rico. Muchas gracias.
So that was wonderful. Our next speaker is Ignacio Diaz, who's the Director of Sales and Marketing at Glenn International. Their generosity is actually bringing us this event today. believe it or not, this facility that we're broadcasting from is an example of a microgrid. The power comes from the sun, we have batteries, and we even have other distributed energy resources that will make sure, no matter what happens, that you'll be able to watch this event. So with that, I'd like Iggy to kind of kick things off and get things rolling with Fasten Your Seatbelts, Electric Vehicles 101, and how they help us, to decarbonize. Iggy?
Thank you so much, Doug. Good morning, everyone. Wow, how do you follow that from Larry? We are blessed by having leaders in our government to be able to guard, maintain, and check up our bags and cover us and help us constantly as we walk through life. Larry Selhammer is definitely a big blessing to all of us. And same thing when we had Kenneth McClintock, which is still as part of our panel, and also somebody that's always watched over us, over the island of Puerto Rico, and the movement towards decarbonization and sustainability. So one of the things that I wanted to bring up is that we have to choose at one point in time in our lives to become part of the problem or part of the solution. I choose to be part of the solution. And I think we all, at some point in time in our lives, we're going to have to go that way. And that means renewable energy. That means electric vehicles. That means cleaning your way and being in sync with the habitat that we live in. This facility, of course, is got 120 kilowatts of solar energy on the roof. We do have storage. We also have charging stations for electric vehicles. My car, same as Kenneth's car, is currently charging with the sun. So all of that energy is actually going into that tank or battery in the car electrically. I hope all of you are visualizing the presentation. Real quick, want to show you guys what we created over the last 100 years. So this is a mess we all made. Humanity has actually managed to find a way of digging oil out of the ground from fossil residuals, and then refining that, sending it over to storage, then using tankers or transportation of some kind to take it over to fuel terminals. From there, it goes into another truck and it goes into a gas station where we actually then drive our cars to get gasoline. I mean, I'm ashamed to show this in the future to my grandkids and show them what a mess we made of the planet and how unsustainable this was. Now we're changing that model. If you can see there where the gas station is at the end, we're changing the model now, moving to electric vehicles, putting a power plant in the middle, and then charging the electric cars with that same energy that comes from fossil fuels, which in reality is not sustainable. We have to change the model. And that model has to be one of renewable energy, storage, pump hydro, other ways of being that are more in sync with our habitat. We cannot continue to do this. We've gone from drilling in the ground to drilling in the ocean to fracking, and we continue to find new ways to destroy our planet. And this is not sustainable. We have to move towards renewables. We have to move to storage to evade those peak hours going into fossil fuel generation and be in more sync into how we live. And of course, all of that energy will end up in our vehicles. So here's the move that we have. And this is something that, whether we like it or not, this is where we're going. So fasten your seatbelts, which is Doug's theme for the conversation, for the presentation, because we're going there. But are we ready to hold on our grid and our environment 559 million electric vehicles in the power grids of the world? Currently, if you look at the graph on the left side of the slide, we have Norway, our friends, the Vikings, are already at 80% of their vehicles are electrified. So there's a lot of countries that are way ahead of where we are. But the move coming from the federal government, as well as our leaders here, Larry, as well as Pierluisi and the rest of the group that is in the local government, is to move us more towards the electrification of transportation. So we're well on our way going in this direction. And if you think we're crazy, we're going to prove you differently. If you can see here, you have more than 400 choices of vehicles coming in by 2025. Most of these manufacturers we all know, from GM, from Ford, from Mercedes, from every brand of vehicles is moving to electric. And I'll show you why in a few seconds. Now, we have some that have made a thicker commitment. We have Volkswagen, Jaguar, Volvo, Mini. They've already made a commitment by after 2025, they will not make an internal combustion vehicle. So all of the vehicles that you're going to be able to buy from Volkswagen, Jaguar, Volvo, or Mini will be only electric. Nothing internal combustion related will be available from them. And understand that many more will follow that suit very soon. Something else that you have to watch from this slide is that we have some new names here too. Lucid, Rivian, Tesla. So we're starting to see new names in the electric vehicle lineup. And at some point in time, we're going to see them actually consolidate. Kind of like when we had, or for those guys, I'm going to date myself, when we had Chevrolet and Oldsmobile and Buick, and now all that is part of General Motors. We're going to see something like that happen as far as consolidation of brands at some point in time in the very near future. But understand that every manufacturer is moving in this direction. And I'm going to give you the 4 reasons why this is happening. I wanted to also highlight, notice in the slide at the bottom right, that's a true chart into what happened last year, which for the first time we saw oil going below 0. Now, of course, that's not because of the electric vehicles. That happened because of the pandemic, but it did happen. So the people that we actually tell at some point in time we're going to see petroleum go to nothing, it happened already, and the next time that will happen will not be because of a pandemic. Okay, so some interesting things are coming along. So the first reason why we're making this change is because of the consumer. If you notice here, if you have a gas vehicle today and you're paying $2.80 a gallon, which I was corrected to say that it was $2.90 or $2.95 a gallon, but let's say $2.80 a gallon, and we have a car that is the efficiency is 20 miles per gallon, you're paying today 14 cents per mile traveled on that car. If you move to a car like what I drive, an electric vehicle, you go from 22 cents kilowatt hour, which is the cost of energy today. I mean, again, some people will say 20 cents, so we're trying to give the benefit to the gas car. At 5 miles per kilowatt hour, my vehicle cost me 4 cents per mile versus other vehicles that are gasoline related, which are 14 cents per mile. So I'm saving a dime or 10 cents a mile. Now, I want to make a small addition to this statement, because first, I'm also saving on oil, filters, belts, and all of the maintenance related to the vehicle because I don't have any of that. The second one is that here at Glen, everything is solar. So 100% of the energy that's going in my car right now, the same as Kenneth McClintock and Javier Rua actually had his Beamer plugged in, is all solar. So that's free. The other one is the one in my house. I have 60 solar panels in my house. So about 50 to 60% of the energy in my house is solar. So if I add that to that equation, my mile is 2 cents instead of 4. So I'm actually saving about 12 cents per mile on my electric vehicle. So that's a pretty big statement. Number 2 is the vehicle manufacturers. If they do not change from internal combustion to electric, they're going to go out of business. Why? Because the cost of lithium continues to drop. And everybody has seen this. We're in the solar business. We saw a lot of solar panels. We saw a lot of battery storage. So we've seen this pattern. The batteries, the storage side, lithium, has decreased massively in the last 5 years. And that chart will continue to go down. And the productivity, the production of lithium storage has gone on dramatically. So understand that this is a pattern that is not going to be stopped. This year, 2021, as you can see from the slide on the board, is the year that crossover happens, where making an electric car will be cheaper than making a car with an internal combustion. So that's why you're seeing all the major manufacturers changing, because if they don't change, they'll go out of business. They will never be able to compete with people that only make electric vehicles. This is one which is the utilities or PREPA or whichever one. Now, of course, PREPA has not joined the ranks as of yet, but we will see them moving very quickly in this direction, whether it's Luma or whichever. But either way, this is a huge business. If you think we have currently in Puerto Rico 2.1 million vehicles, you grab 10% of those cars, which, by the way, that's the number where you will stop getting the incentive of no taxes to the electric vehicles coming into the island. But you grab 210,000 cars and you put them for 4 charges a month, pretty much the same way you put gas in your car, with a mean or average battery of 80 kilowatt hours at 20 cents kilowatt hour. That represents $161 million of invoicing from PREPA to these customers. So if you add that to 20% of the vehicles changing to electric, that's $320 million of invoicing. That is the number one customer for PREPA now and for years to come. The other thing that's important about this chart is that this is over $550 million of fuel, gasoline, diesel, that you will not be depending on. So you want to talk about sustainability? This is sustainable. This is something that's going to help our resiliency towards hurricanes and other conditions. This is a way of living. All right. Now, the big part here, the big catalyst is the fleets, the Amazons of this world, the FedEx, the UPSs, which are seeing this as a great opportunity. If I can cut down my cost per mile of doing deliveries to less than half, say 1/3, that's a beautiful thing. So they're going to continue to push for all these fleets changing to electrical, which means that we have to step up our game to make sure that we can deliver those energies. Now, this is also something real quick for people to understand that when you're charging on level 1 or level 2 on the electric charging stations, you're charging on alternate current or AC current. When you're charging on level 3 or DC fast charge, this is actually DC to DC. So it goes straight to the battery. And that actually is a much faster way of charging the vehicle. When you go into DC fast charge, you can charge the car in approximately 8 to 10 minutes. So, and we'll discuss that in a few seconds. Here's a chart that actually talks about it. When you're going in DC fast charge, the most you will be charging will be 1 hour, but you can charge the vehicle in 13 minutes or less, depending on where you have your storage capacity at this point. When you use a level 2 charging station, which is typically what you have in your house, 240 volts AC current, that takes 2 to 8 hours. So this is typically what we're going to have in all of our garages, charging overnight. So the next day we're at 100% capacity all the time. Level 1 charging station plugs to 120 volts, and it usually takes a long time to charge. So a lot of people are not depending on the level 1 or 120 volt. Now, if you guys don't understand that this is happening, take a look at what's happening in Europe. This unit is actually a electrolinera or a gas station in Europe. And these charging stations, which are tritium charging stations, those are 350 kilowatts in each one of those. So that's 6 350 kilowatt charging stations with CCX plug fast charge, capable of charging 218 miles in less than 10 minutes. So you're charging over 200 miles in less than 10 minutes on your charge. On the car. But at the same time, people have to start thinking that this is 2 megawatts within a substation. So that's a lot of energy. And people have to start thinking that you have to have a serious infrastructure to be able to accommodate something like what they have already started in all over Europe, right? This is OCPP, a little bit of a story regarding OCPP. This is Open Charge Point Protocol. If you're gonna buy a charger and it's gonna be open to the public, make sure it has OCPP. This is the Open Charge Protocol that actually lets you charge for the energy consumed by that vehicle. And it also lets the power company monitor that to maintain that grid healthy. Now, as far as the future is concerned, and I want you to understand that there's a lot of more stuff coming. This is our brand, which is WISE for charging stations and infrastructure. But imagine having a solar canopy that generates all that energy or complements the energy being utilized by the grid, with storage underneath the ground, which is lithium, and then putting all that energy into the charging stations to do DC fast charge and charge your car within 10 to 15 minutes. That's where we're driving that. This is the V2X, just so you understand that this is out there and it's coming. V2X stands for vehicle to X, meaning the grid to vehicle, vehicle to load, or the more important one, the one on the right bottom, which is vehicle to home. This is one where that charging station that's on the wall will be bidirectional, which means that the energy goes from your home or from the grid or from the solar panels to your car. But if the power goes out or the grid cuts out, you actually can grab the energy out of your car and bring it to your home. So it works like a UPS for your whole house. If you have a hurricane, you can actually feed out of that. And this is the future of electrification for transportation, where all of these cars become batteries for our home. And this is actually already out there. So we're already cultivating and releasing our products by the end of the year, which will be completely bidirectional charging stations for the home. And then, of course, this is the gas stations of today, right? But not gas. This is actually power stations. So you have Shell working on theirs, Total, Tesla having theirs, and all of these are level 3 DC fast charge stations where people come in, have a cup of coffee, and they charge their vehicles. This is the way of the future, and this is what we're going to continue to see everywhere in the world. Guys, I think I'm right on time. So 14 minutes and 34 seconds. I want to make sure I close by saying, please join us. We're here to change the world. Kenneth McClintock has us beat. He's been at it for a while. But we're here to change the world. We need to become part of the solution and stop being part of the problem. So join us as we go along. I have to now introduce the next speaker, Mr. William Ryan. He's a clinical associate. He's a professor and director of the Matter of Energy at the University of Illinois. And actually, he's going to be joining us virtually. So I think our whole group managing this will be transferring over to him. William, I'll leave it to you. Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. You have a wonderful day.
Well, good morning. I hope my sound is working well. I'm joining you from Chicago and want to talk about a completely different subject this morning. And I understand I have 10 minutes, by the way, so keep an eye on me. I'll keep an eye on the time. I want to talk about a completely different subject, although one that's intensely related with what the last speaker was talking about, and that is the grid. And the fact that we do have to get this electricity from some operation in one of many different ways. So the organizers I know are going to be putting up my slides. I do not see them yet. And nope, no comment from the organizers. So we were hoping that the slides come up. They're being handled remotely. One of the things, what we're going to talk about this morning is what the history of the grid has been. Thank you. What the history of the grid, no, keep trying. What the history of the grid has been historically, and where we are now, and where it's going, and how that relates to the grid in Puerto Rico, which is structured somewhat differently for geographic reasons. And we're going to be taking a look at that. I don't know the issue is on the slides, but I can talk over a little bit on the first couple of slides. When the original electric grid was set up, and by this I mean going back to 1880, when the first electrification was done to a small area of New York City, everyone is familiar with the fact that it was direct current, and that that was then later replaced with alternating current. Well, direct current systems had an economic problem, and that is the power station had to be quite near any user. By the way, any comment from the organizers on how the slides are going? Could they spring in?
Just continue. We'll catch up to you, sir.
Okay. I will. You'll catch up. Okay, I will keep going. The original system was direct current, and therefore you couldn't transmit the power very far. That was an incredible economic limitation in that you ended up with very small power stations, and ending up with very small power stations meant that you had to build multiple power stations, just opening up on my end here, multiple power stations all over a city, a single city, just to generate electric power. That, fortunately, was something that was solved by alternating current. In alternating current, we suddenly had a power we could change in voltage. And as soon as we did that, we could generate power at high voltage and send it all over major urban areas. So instead of having neighborhood electric power, we had power going to an entire urban area coming from much larger generating plants. This, for the first time, actually reduced the cost of electricity to the point where it was something that middle-class people, and I do mean middle-class people, could ever afford. The original electricity service was so expensive, it was actually basically a concept for the rich. That mass production and the fact that large power plants were the key in lowering the price of electricity is an interesting point for us to remember. As we look more and more at microgrids and smaller generating sources, we also have to keep a watchful eye out on the price of electricity, as we may be sacrificing some of the mass production aspects of electricity. But of course, with more localized electric generation, we're also saving some of the costs of transmission. But it's a balancing act. So microgrids are a very interesting technical concept, but it's something we have to keep an eye on. By basically about 1910, the grid was effectively large urban generating plants feeding whole cities, alternating current, and regulation had come in as these plants now monopolized the market, and therefore there was regulation governing these plants. With that, we end up, and I'm just quickly cutting back and forth oh, we have it. Very good. With that, we can go on to the next slide and see how the industry basically technically evolved in the 20th century. And the biggest technical evolution in the 20th century was to move to add long-distance electric transmission. That was high voltage electric transmission between cities was actually a invention that came along after, basically after the development of localized urban electric systems. And long distance transmission allowed large power plants to be moved outside of the city. It also allowed us to do a couple of things for the first time that were environmentally desirable. We were able to take long distance lines and reach hydroelectric plants at a distance from major cities and bring that power into the cities. So for the first time, we were able to get away from where electricity started, which was nothing but coal. And we ended up with a large part of the US grid in hydroelectric power. I understand that PREPA in Puerto Rico also started as the Hydroelectric Management Authority in the late 1930s, early 1940s. The relationship between hydroelectric dams and electric power is pretty intense. So with that, on generation moving out of town, the electric supply process had the potential to become regional. Notice, by the way, that these were controlled entirely from one end to the other by a monopoly utility. And we'll talk about different definitions of utilities nationwide in a minute. But it was all controlled by usually one monopoly company that generated the electricity and brought power directly to customers. So in Northern Illinois, this would have been ComEd. 50 miles north of us in Wisconsin, this would have been Wisconsin Electric, which means these vertically integrated utilities were nearby or next to each other geographically. The next part of the evolution was something that wasn't possible in Puerto Rico, making Puerto Rico different. And that is, can we switch to the next slide? And the first thing was, I think we missed. Try going to the next one. Thank you. The first thing was that we had these vertically integrated generation, transmission, distribution chains next to each other, like ComEd and Wisconsin Electric, our illustration. In the 1950s and 60s, these companies developed interrelated networks, basically interconnections, which allowed in the 1950s and 60s the different networks to reinforce each other. If there was an emergency in ComEd, we could get power from Wisconsin Electric. If there's and vice versa, an emergency in Wisconsin Electric, they could get power from ComEd. As time went on, that turned into an actual economic market where ComEd today exports nighttime nuclear power as far away as Indiana, Ohio, so on and so forth. Well, clearly, if you're on an island, this interrelation was not possible. And that makes running a utility more challenging in that any particular mechanical failure you have to make up locally. You cannot bring it in from off the island. So Puerto Rico, Oahu in Hawaii, which has the biggest population in Hawaii, both have that challenge in running a major grid in isolation. It's also true in other places in the world much more commonly, but it is a challenge. The second one, and because you have to do all your own grid reinforcing, if something doesn't work, you have to have a backup. The second one is that we then, at the year 2000, deregulated the entire market throughout the United States on transmission. And I have to realize it was all of the United States. Interstate transmission became an open market where new people could sell into the market. Some of this is reflected in Puerto Rico in that you also have people who are not the utility selling into the market, private generating plants. But whether that basically your transmission system or high voltage system would not fall under this deregulation because it is not interstate. The same is true in Texas, where their transmission system, or Hawaii for that matter, where their transmission system doesn't fall under federal regulation because it's not interstate, and therefore wasn't hit by this particular regulation. However, special regulations obviously can apply in any area, and I know that Oahu has many open market suppliers of electricity or deregulated utility plants, where a private developer generates electricity and simply sells it into the transmission system. And I see from your generating schedule that Puerto Rico does as well. Okay, moving beyond that, we have to think of where things need to go. This basically shows the legal definitions of what is transmission. You're talking about it, but you're saying definitely what it is. Transmission has a legal definition, and it is everything in blue on this chart. High voltage, basically high voltage distribution, typically over 100 kilovolts in the electric system. Once you go through a substation into lower voltage, usually below 50,000 volts, you are into distribution. And the generating plant over on the left is a generating plant and sends out through a transformer very high voltage power. So these are legal definitions. And if you have a private generating plant, they may be putting this into then the public transmission system. And so who owns what depends on legal definitions. And it really is, ultimately, from a legal point of view, it just comes down to voltage. Okay. So now, there we go. We talk about what do we see for the future. We're looking here at a grid that is now using bulk power generation on the left side of the grid, a high voltage rail coming down to wherever it is we want to distribute to customers. And the area in blue or the area in yellow is basically our customers. And we're sending power out to these customers in yellow on low voltage. We then can have variable generation resources, VGR, types of resources like wind and solar, tie in a number of different locations. We have, certainly everyone talks about community solar farms that feed a neighborhood, being localized community solar. In addition, residential, of course, can have solar panels on the roof. This one didn't fit in, that doesn't fit in the diagram, but it's certainly an element. And with those types of generating plants and with the commercial solar wind farms tied to large commercial developments or perhaps an industry, what they're doing is they're taking load during times when their resource is available, taking load off the main rail, and because they're satisfying their own power needs. And depending on your local regulation and distribution control, they may actually be backflowing electricity to their neighbors. And when you do that, you're taking more load off the main transmission rail. However, the fastest, and this should be understood, the fastest growing element in solar at the moment is utility solar, which is actually feeding solar power to the main rail. And it's also by far and away the least expensive way of generating solar. Okay, and so there's a big change out there in the industry in the last few years, moving from smaller to larger solar farms. We also, in the US, have various definitions of utilities, investor-owned utilities, by the way, the most common, municipal utilities, and rural electric co-ops. The structure of PREPA seems to be basically a municipal utility, and a municipal utility, municipal utilities exist all over the United States, and they are owned and governed by a local government entity. There are municipal utilities in large cities in the United States that actually have more customers than PREPA. So it's basically a municipal structure. We're looking at a period founded in 1941, 1.5 million customers. That is effectively meters, which I thought was interesting. Gave them an idea of size. This is a large municipal, but not the largest in the United States. PREPA's own generation seems to be oil and hydro, according to their basically their open sources, and that there's numerous privately owned plants feeding the main rail. Okay, feeding main transmission, coal, wind, solar farms, privately owned. In other words, you already have a background of people coming in and generating electricity as a service, as a market, as a sellable product. Current plan includes microgrids to reinforce the system. Is what I understand is a very common part of your plan. This basically shows an element on the microgrid, elements of a microgrid, where you basically microgrid is a central controller tying a number of customers together, referred to as controllable loads, with some localized power generation, whether it be solar, wind, fuel cells, CHP systems, and some backup power. The microgrids then do need to be tied together with the transmission main rail so that we can economically optimize the type of power being sold to the customer. But the beauty of the microgrid structure, or distribution loops in general, which is just a little more general term for this kind of thing, is that if the main transmission rail goes down, you still have localized resources that can be used for the local customers. And my understanding is that with the hurricanes problems in the Southeast, one of the biggest failures has been in just keeping transmission lines up. And so this would add a tremendous element of resiliency to customer service. It would also, but it would also need a transmission line so that you're able to go out in times of no problems on the grid and get power from the lowest cost resource. Resiliency isn't the only thing we need to supply. We need to supply average overall affordability as well. And so the transmission system is still needed in normal times. Having a backup for it, however, can be absolutely essential. The amount of damage we can do with short-term power failures is clear in the billions we have seen in Texas. Okay, I believe that there is one more slide. And this was just a quick look at what's advertised as different plans for Puerto Rico as the system is developed further. PREPA's plan and a couple of other plans, the other two plans featuring more solar and less gas generation. What would be the basis of this decision in the long run? Basically simulating the grid, simulating the variable resource, whether it be solar or wind, and I was surprised that wind wasn't a more major thing, whether it be solar or wind. Doing this in large-scale simulation and seeing what leads to a stable grid going forward. How much solar can you put in and how much gas generation do you need to have in order to have generating plants that can be turned on and off to meet demand at discretion. And it's a matter of really simulating the system. So I think it's interesting. People are proposing different levels of solar, and I think it would also be good if people would keep their minds open on other forms, particularly wind, and looking at the local climate to see where there may be opportunities to do that. Okay, that I don't know. I think I may have gone over my time, but I'm all set. And thank you. And I think I need to let you go for the next speaker.
Gracias, Bill. Well done. So our next speaker is Javier Ru from Solar Energy Storage Association in Puerto Rico called CESA. He's the Chief Policy Officer. He's going to share what they do to help our island move forward.
Hi to all. Great presentations this morning. Thank you. And happy Earth Day, happy Earth Week. I guess it starts yesterday and keeps on going for the rest of the week. So I'm Javier Rua Jover, as Doug mentioned, Chief Policy Officer for CESA. What is CESA? Let me see if I get this right. Yeah. So CESA, the Solar Energy and Storage Association of Puerto Rico, what's our story? Well, we've touched a little bit about, and Iggy's presentation was very good on Puerto Rico's energy paradigm, which is, and the prior presentation is a 19th century energy paradigm based on fossil fuels, long distance generation and transmission, importing our resources, importing our energy sources. CESA was born after Hurricane Maria. In Hurricane Maria, all Puerto Ricans suffered. Puerto Ricans of all stripes. We suffered the longest blackout in U.S. history. Puerto Ricans died because of lack of basic power. Puerto Ricans died because, in many ways, because of our outdated and truly, outdated energy ecosystem, which is based on procuring fuels. It's based on basically exporting resources, money, to bring in fuel and then transport it internally and then transmit it via long distances. And CESA was born after that event of Maria, after that consensus was really cemented in Puerto Rico, the fact that our energy system cannot be our future. We have to change. We have to take our destiny into our own hands and change our future. And the way you change that is that these consensuses that are built, the fact that we have to change our energy ecosystem, move towards renewables, requires engagement with policymakers, engagement with those that make our laws, engagement with those that will implement our laws. And I've been at this for a while in other disciplines, including environmental protection and telecoms regulation. And we have a former president of the Senate here, Kenneth McClintock, which has been at this for years also in the policy making side, enabling the new narratives of the future, the narratives of resiliency and prosperity, the narratives of 21st century technologies, and as Iggy mentioned, the narratives of EVs that are here today and are the future. So CESA, as you can see from the slides, CESA advocates with these policymakers. That means the legislature. The legislature makes our laws. And we heard the opening statement by the Honorable Larry Selhammer. Larry Selhammer is Puerto Rico's Secretary of State, Puerto Rico's Lieutenant Governor, and he is also the author of Act 17 of 2019, which is the law that basically codifies these policies, these consensuses that were built after Maria, of the direction that we have to take in this island. And so Act 17 is Larry Selhammer's baby, and that makes all of us, all stakeholders, very happy that he will help us keep moving in that direction that was set out in that act. And CESA was involved heavily as a stakeholder in that act, basically helping policymakers write down and codify those policies. It was a great bipartisan bill, great bipartisan law, led by Larry Selhammer and former Senator Eduardo Batia, who's also a very forward-looking policymaker. And those laws were set in Act 17 for this purpose and for this mission. So in many ways, CESA's DNA is Act 17's DNA and vice versa. And CESA is the house of or the home of all companies in Puerto Rico, most companies, over 87% of the companies that are the stakeholders moving Puerto Rico in this direction. In this direction, specifically solar energy and storage. Solar at all scales, from residential scales, your home, your little home grid. I have solar and storage. I charge with the sun. My car, I charge my life with the sun. I'm charging my car here with Iggy's permission in his facility. So I am not using my money to export my money to another economy to buy fuel to pollute my island. So these are the companies, some of them that are members that are moving this direction. You can see very recognized multinational names like Tesla, and established Puerto Rico companies like historical companies like Windmar that works at all scales, and also Windmar does some wind too, and others. And we have financing companies. You can see BMR Energy also. That's Richard Branson's company, recent member, and we want new champions here. There's companies that are great companies that are out there that are looking to join because they want to be part of this team, and that's who we are. We want these companies to grow because these companies are the companies that make this future possible and are making it possible right now. Back to Act 17. So Act 17, which again is Puerto Rico's Energy Public Policy Act, is basically the brainchild of multiple stakeholders led by Senator Larry Selhammer, then Senator and Senate Vice President Larry Selhammer, now Secretary of State Selhammer. This is also sometimes called the Puerto Rico RPS law in many ways. It includes the Puerto Rico's Renewable Portfolio Standard. The actual RPS law is a prior law, Act 82, but the Renewable Portfolio Standard for Puerto Rico is basically the mix that we want, the energy mix that we want for our island going forward in terms of energy generation. And that's the policy that sets that Puerto Rico has to start moving next year very quickly to 100% renewable energy by 2050, starting in 2022, 20%. And yes, Puerto Rico right now, its energy mix. Some slide mentioned energy and oil and hydro. It's truly 97% oil. It's truly 97% petroleum products and highly polluting imported petroleum products that are burned to create energy. Again, that is $2 billion worth, more or less, of money being, fleeing our economy to buy these fuels. So we have to jump from 97% dependency on fuel, on oil, lack of energy autonomy in Puerto Rico by 97% to 100% energy autonomy with renewables by 2050. And Act 17 basically sets that goal and sets the policies that move us towards that goal. And to be frank, Act 17 is probably the most aggressive pro-renewables law in the nation, perhaps in Western civilization. But we also have luckily the biggest federal grants of money flying around, especially and basically starting to flow now with the forward-looking presidency of the Biden administration. That are the biggest amounts of money out there, and it's almost a Marshall Plan that could be leveraged to make these promises true. So CESA is very focused, and has been focused since day one on not only getting the policy right narrative, which is solar and renewables at all scales, and talking about scales that means life-saving systems for people in their house, because as we said before, people died because of lack of power, basic power, running your little fridge, running your little respirator, running your lights and not slipping and falling. It's basic stuff. That's one thing. And also energy prosperity, because of the economics of switching from highly polluting, expensive generation to a paradigm of quickly plummeting costs on renewables and storage. I was talking to Wiggy before about the incredible slide or decrease in storage costs constantly. So down to 50% a few years, and now it's less than that. So this is ongoing, and it's driven. These price reductions are driven by market powers, market forces. EVs are critical in that narrative. Everybody's going to have a car, or most people will have a car, and many of those will be electric cars. And those cars have batteries that are the same battery in your cell phone, the same battery in your garage, in different sizes, and they will change the world, and they are changing the world. So that's who we are. In terms of the policies that CESA has been advocating, of course, and even before Act 17, and this has to do also with the narrative started by forward-looking stakeholders like Ken McClintock, an independent regulator. It started with telecom in Puerto Rico, Now we have a very strong independent regulator in energy. A bit, in a little bit, it's fashioned after the telecom regulator. So to create the conditions, the market conditions for this leapfrogging energy paradigm that we need. Rules, regulations, funding, financing, in terms of financing, there's a lot of federal money out there that we're trying to plan in the correct way. And, there's the regulator has an RFP out there that's important to move in this direction to comply with this RPS. It's gigawatts of power, gigawatts of storage to be spent in Puerto Rico to make these promises true. So with that, thanks for the opportunity, and I leave you with just a thought. We have a conference June 28th where we'll talk all topics solar and storage. It's going to be, I think, our 5th CESA conference, so you're welcome to come. So again, thanks to all, thanks to the organizers, and happy Earth Week 12. And the next speaker, Mark Lopata, PE, President of Solar Island Energy and Azimuth Energy, Microgrid Lab 101. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that introduction. And I'm happy to be here. I appreciate you inviting me and giving me a few minutes to talk about real practice in the microgrid. Solar Island Energy and Azimuth Energy are one and the same company. We're based in the States and in the Bahamas. We are a turnkey design builder of PV projects, microgrids, battery plants, and energy efficiency projects. I'm the president of the company, the principal engineer. We've been working in the Caribbean for about 12 years or so. We also do independent engineering services. And here are some pictures of jobs that we've built in the Caribbean. Ground mounts, carports. The middle picture is a large carport we built in St. Kitts for the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank. I am having a little bit of a screen problem. Hold on a minute. Okay. Okay, the project we're going to talk about is Highborne Key. It's in the Bahamas. It's a privately owned resort island. And this is their website. And this website is showing up as the culmination of about 2.5 years of effort in the sales process, the modeling process, helping the client understand how the project works, how it will work, and getting to the point where it's operational. So the first thing we do is we start estimating how's the system going to perform and how much energy is being used on site. Here's a typical day showing the load of the island on the black line, the production of a sunny PV system in the gold line, the red line being the generator running, and then the dashed black line being the resulting power from those sources. So you have to keep in mind that this island has been operating as a resort for about 60 years. And since that first light bulb came on 60 years ago, there have been generators running. They have 4 of them, ranging from 250 kW up to 450 kW. Any one time, there are 2 of them running, sometimes 3. So there are people that have been working on that island their whole lives. And every day, the generators have been on. So this has been a pretty transformative time for them. This is a typical day, but we know things aren't typical through the course of the year. So we model the energy demand and the fuel consumption and everything by the month, by the hour, throughout the course of the year. This is a data map showing the months of the year and the time of day, months of the year along the x-axis on the bottom, time of day going up the left side, and the color scale showing the difference in loads at different times of the day. So we can look at this and say the loads in July are heavier than the loads any other time of the year. And the loads in February, March, November, and December are the lowest of the year. So we start by making assumptions and figuring out how much energy the island's using. And sometimes we have to do that with fuel logs. And a lot of these islands don't monitor the fuel. So we just know how much diesel fuel they burn to make electricity. And we convert that to energy consumption. Now we start with this basic model and we add some variability to it. And the variability tells us more what a real world is like. So we know it doesn't change on sharp lines day to day or month to month. So this is more like what the load looks usually, ranging up to 600 kW. Then this is what we expect the generators to be running after the system's fully implemented. The green and yellow are the times when the generator is running. The black is the time when the generator is not running. And we make these estimations and help the customer understand how it's going to perform. And then once we do that, we estimate the financial performance. In this case, we're expecting, depending on the time of year, a 40 to 75% reduction in the generator runtime and pretty good financial performance. 19% unlevered IRR is a pretty good investment. And the owner of this island once told us in a meeting that he was happy to be investing in something that was going to pay itself back. It improves the property value by about $10 million, which is just a basic real estate calculation, and it reduces the cost of energy the first year by about 22% in the graph. So right now, with diesel fuel, we're making electricity about 40 cents a kilowatt hour. With the microgrid, we'll be around 30 cents a kilowatt hour, and it will stay that way for 25 years instead of going up 3% a year. So once we get approval to launch into the project, we have to start with the assessment, which is in the upper left-hand corner. That's our expert field personnel making their expert assessment of the project site. And then we go into construction, coincidentally, right at the same time we go into a global pandemic. You can see the racking in the lower left-hand corner is built to the what is Carolec's reference manual, Solar Under Storm. We were one of the contributing authors to those volumes about hurricane survivability in the Caribbean. So these are fully engineered to 180 mile-an-hour wind. You'll notice that the electrical equipment off to the right side of that rack is separated from the rack and not attached to it. And there are lots of engineering details that go into this survivability. The battery plant is in the upper right-hand corner. That is in a shade structure and also a protective structure that's also engineered to 180 mile-an-hour wind. And lower right, of course, is an aerial view of the system after it's been completed. We're big on operational safety once construction is complete. So there's a lot of wayfinding. There's a lot of cautionary signage to help people understand where they can go, where they cannot go. We like to put the yellow and black stripe tape on the floor to make sure nobody puts anything in those areas and blocks access to equipment. That is all equipment that we installed for this microgrid. And then from that, we also have wayfinding placards around the system so that wherever you are, you know where you are. Wherever we are, we know we're here. So that whenever you're dealing with a situation in the middle of the night, in the middle of a hurricane, you can always figure out where you are, what's connected to what. That's part of our owner's manual. And then we also have these various standard operating procedures. What do you do if the island goes dark? What do you do if there's a hurricane coming? So we want to make sure that if we can't answer the phone and our operations team and our operations center is not available, that the island staff always know what to do. We do this for all of our PV projects even, but microgrids are even more important. So now I'm going to try to switch to a live feed for a couple minutes and show you around that, if I can figure out how to do that. Give me 1 minute to master the technology. Let's see if I can do it. Is it going to work? Okay. I am hoping that right now you are seeing an online graph of let me try it one more time. Give it a minute.
Mark, you there?
Yes.
You know, I think we got a quick snapshot of it, so we're able to see it. And again, it's just a great example of a working microgrid in our neighborhood. So thank you very much for the wonderful presentation.
¿Se ve?
Okay.
We're trying to play a little catch up today. So our next speaker is Mario Franceski. He's a certified energy manager, and he's going to talk about something a little different we can do with renewable energy, which is very important if we're ever going to reach our decarbonization goals. Mario.
Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon at this point. My name is Mario Franceski. Very glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me, Douglas. And as I said, my name is Mario, and I work with MR Franceski. We're a local industrial distributor. We serve Puerto Rico and the Caribbean region. For the past 20 years, I've been involved with measurements and verification of thermal energy systems. Pretty much my day consists of optimizing boilers, steam systems, heat exchangers, and I work very closely with the industrial sector of Puerto Rico. I'm involved with combustion tuning, fuel switching, waste heat recovery, among other initiatives to reduce fuel consumption and emissions. As most people know, the industrial sector represents a large percentage of the world's energy consumption, and as a whole, heat energy is up there pretty much with electricity when it comes to the consumption of these facilities. So the next couple of minutes, I would like to talk about and how to address this heat energy, perhaps in a renewable manner. So why solar thermal? Many people know photovoltaic panels. With solar thermal, we use thermal collector panels. They're pretty much, they call panels, but they are not the same. In the case of photovoltaic panels, they produce electricity. In the case of thermal collectors, they produce heat. And the good thing about these collectors is like they produce heat in a direct conversion of solar energy. We're talking about pretty much 90% efficiency on the collector side. And when we're talking about on the residential side, which Puerto Rico is very used to utilizing solar collectors, these collectors can pretty much satisfy 100% perhaps the domestic hot water needs of these residential aspects. When it comes to the industrial process, the fraction could be 40 to 70%. So Puerto Rico is an industrial island. It's no secret, let's not forget this. And the industrial sector is key to the economy of Puerto Rico. All these facilities require thermal energy. And the main industries that can benefit from solar thermal, we're talking about food and beverage, life science, hospitals, and manufacturing industries in general. These industries use thermal energy to make hot water. They use it for laundries, cleaning, sterilization, dehumidification. We're seeing now absorption chillers that use heat just to produce cold water and for air conditioning and other purposes. So Puerto Rico has a solid infrastructure when it comes to mechanical contractors. So we're ready to install and maintain these systems. So deployment of this technology is not a challenge for us here in Puerto Rico. So in the end, solar heating for industrial process will make the island more competitive. It will reduce fossil fuel consumption. Solar heating for industrial purposes does not require fuel transportation or storage. So it's definitely an alternative to consider. Okay, so now here we can visualize a typical energy system where we have fossil fuel to produce heat. This heat is produced via combustion, which is a chemical energy transfer. And the idea right now with thermal energy for industrial process is to supplement and to be able to reduce this fossil fuel consumption, which in Puerto Rico, for the most part, is diesel fuel number 2 at the moment. Okay, so here we can visualize most of the components that are utilized for solar heating in industrial processes. We have the collectors, we have the heat transfer fluid, the storage vessel, and then we have the integration to the existing system. We also can see pumps, valves, and controllers to make sure that we do the integration gracefully. All right, so how do we absorb this energy? And we use collectors, thermal collectors. The most common collectors that are typically used are flat plate collectors. Those are the ones that most residential end users utilize at the moment. We're seeing a trend towards vacuum tube collectors, vacuum tube of collectors with parabolic concentrators. And then when we move to more advanced technology like tracking technology, now we're seeing parabolic trough collectors and linear Fresnel collectors. Those are able to achieve higher temperatures and they can even produce steam. Okay, so how do we select this collector technology? It depends mostly on the temperature that we're required to achieve and whether we want to utilize liquid phase or steam state. So we need to make a decision. For example, if we're going to be doing some boiling or drying, just cleaning in general, the temperatures are typically below 210, 220. That would be considered low temperature, and flat plate and evacuated tubes could perhaps do the job. Now if we're moving to distillation and a more advanced manufacturing process, then we can use the linear Fresnel or the parabolic concentrators. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about storage. We use thermal storage to handle the mismatch between the solar production and the demand for the heat, pretty much similar to photovoltaic and batteries. So in the case of thermal systems, we can store the thermal energy using water, which is a very common and inexpensive fluid. We store it in vessels that can be pressurized or atmospheric. Most of these vessels are atmospheric, so that brings down the price. We also will see heat exchangers that could be inside of the vessels, or they could be adjacent to the vessel. So we definitely have this storage component that helps the whole system as a whole and helps with the intermittent nature of the sun. Another way to store would be via steam storage. The industrial sector is used to this type of technology. They're called steam accumulators. And then by using high technology collectors, we're able to produce low pressure steam to charge the accumulator. And then we can use just regular flat plate collectors to preheat the makeup water. And then this system will just store that energy in there. So visually, so you can see a typical application. We're talking about preheating an existing hot water storage tank. As I said earlier, we're looking for a 40 to 70% fraction, where the existing boiler perhaps can do most of the job, and then we're supplementing. So the preheating of cold water is a very typical application. The boiler will consume less fuel. Less fuel will reduce emissions and will reduce the cost of the system as a whole. Now, this is also right now another application where we have a direct steam generator. As we saw earlier, we can charge the steam accumulator, and in certain cases, we can literally run a boiler with these high technology parabolic trough collectors. In this case, we can supplement the existing system. Maybe you have fired boilers that are in line, and these thermal energy boilers are going to supplement. And again, we can preheat the makeup water, and this will reduce the consumption of the fuel and the emissions. I'm trying to stick with the time frame here. So right now, this is just to visualize a typical solar thermal collector system for commercial or even large residential, where we have collectors in the roof. We have the tanks positioned somewhere inside of the facility, a couple of heat exchangers. We can separate the heat transfer fluid from the process fluid or the domestic hot water. Okay, so as far as planning for these systems, we need to take into consideration how much space we have. If it's an urban setting, then the roof most likely will be the preferred location. If it's a suburban location, then we can have real estate next door where we can locate the collectors. We also need to take into consideration the storage for the location for the storage or the accumulation of this heat energy, and obviously the budget. There's experts in the field that can assist, like myself, where we can look at the applications, we can evaluate the savings, we can make simulations, and we can calculate return on investments. So from an outlook on how do we take this in and make sure that we grow solar thermal, we need to step up with the awareness of these systems, get out there, spread the word. Once we have an installed base, we will build momentum, and we will take it from there. From a financial perspective, the equipment and material required to implement this process, there's definitely materials and equipment, so that cost needs to be addressed as with any system. The return on investment are improving every year. The technology gets deployed faster and faster, so that's going to improve the return on investments. So we foresee a positive outlook moving forward. There's no silver bullet. It's going to take multiple efforts harmonized towards the common goal of reducing emissions. And these energy transitions do not happen overnight. It's going to take awareness and ingenuity. I'm confident that we're on the right track, and I'm very glad to be part of the movement. Thank you, and have a great day. So our next speaker is going to be Gilberto Guevara, who's Senior Manager for PR Science, Technology Research Trust. And the title of the presentation will be Resiliency 101.
Muchas gracias. Agradecemos a Glenn por este evento. Esperamos que la información del evento cale y quede entre nosotros. So I want to thank Glenn for hosting this event and promoting what will be the way ahead. Decarbonization takes a lot of effort. It takes many pieces to come together. Climate change is among us, and we're ready to start working towards improving our environment. So the presentation from the Puerto Rico Science Technology Trust is how we intend to mitigate some of the climate events and climate effect changes. A little bit about the trust, who we are. The aim of the trust is, since 2004 that we started, is to encourage and promote the innovation and transfer of commercialization of technologies and the creation of jobs in this technology sector. I have to highlight that we are responsible for Puerto Rico's public policy on science, technology, research, and development. What we're seeing today are a series of presentations that are done by the folks who are already commercializing many of these innovations. The mission of the trust is to facilitate and build capacity for the continuity of Puerto Rico's economy and the citizens' well-being We do that through innovation-driven enterprises. Much of what we're about to discover in the years ahead is how this paradigm shift turns into new technologies and into commercialized applications that we all can benefit from. The trust has a number of challenges that it faces in implementing its policy. That's why we have created a number of programs that support this paradigm shift. In the trust, we facilitate capacity building with research grants, with a registration of intellectual property. We have a technology transfer office. We also provide SBIR, a small business innovation research grant funding, match the grants that federal agencies provide to researchers. We also have competitive funding through RFPs. We create the clusters and the promotion of peer and subject matter experts coming together in the areas of agriculture, Internet of Things, enterprise and entrepreneurial incubation and acceleration, clinical research, vector control, public health, and above all, business resiliency. We have 18 programs altogether. I'm seeing the slides. I'll continue. Our work is aimed at addressing the resiliency and the sustainability of the programs that are installed as part of the climate change. So we'll take a look at, and this is our main focus, the impacts to vulnerable populations. So resiliency in our society starts with people. We recognize that not all people are vulnerable, but that we work hard to bridge the inequalities and the technology gaps to increase the resiliency of these vulnerable populations. We know Puerto Rico from many studies. The World Economic Forum has listed us as one of the more propense areas because of the geographic location and the island environment to be affected by one of the effects of climate change, which is sea level rise. I'll address some of the points on sea level rise. You see the sea level rise projections through the year 2100. So we're expecting 11 feet of sea level rise in Puerto Rico, and that for an island environment, it is very damaging. The Global Climate Risk Index also in 2020 published its report where it highlighted that Puerto Rico was the most affected area along with Myanmar and Haiti as the most affected countries in the year 2018. We expect that we're ranking pretty high in that Global Climate Risk Index. National Geographic and a lot of the work that's been done by many of the researchers attached to the trust, the Puerto Rico Science Technology Trust, indicate that rising seas will change our coastline. There are many vast areas that are going to be underwater. The projections are for critical facilities like the International Airport, Luis Muñoz Marin, to be underwater. At least 30% of that entire runway that we currently use in less than 20 years will be underwater if we don't take mitigation measures right now. That's all climate change. And that's where decarbonization becomes very important. The less carbon we have in this environment, the less warming we have, but the effects of sea level are going to be among us. This is not new. 122,000 years ago, the sea rose 25 feet above present level. So we're coming to that cycle where nature is again waking us up to the effects that it'll bring upon us. One of the issues that we're trying to address at the Science Trust is the preparation of the professionals. Right now, the universities do not have it in the curriculum to prepare the engineers, all the different disciplines on the engineering fields, the architectural fields, to address how we're going to be combating or mitigating sea level rise. So again, as we look at resiliency, I tend to go back to the initial presentation of resiliency done by Judith Rowland, who's a former Rockefeller Foundation director, CEO. The Rockefeller Foundation had a very interesting program worldwide called 100 Resilient Cities. out of that program, the information, the basic knowledge of what resiliency is began to be formed. She used to say, resilience is to be prepared to bounce forward better. We know now from the days of after Maria affected us and the congressional hearings that the Bipartisan Budget Act started with a notion of building back better, which is now, and to our benefit, is one of the themes that is being picked up by the Biden-Harris administration, and that's where we are trying to adapt and to grow. In order to do that, there are two concepts that Judith used to say. There are two elements that are always taken into account. One is our organizations, our institutions, our infrastructure. How is that managed? The other is the human element. How do we adapt, and do we have the ability to adapt to that change? This is the map. This is the linear progression of what resiliency is about and what we need to do. Begin to be cognizant and knowledgeable of the different elements and the different steps in resiliency. So, of course, baseline assessments, we must evaluate where we are. We know now in Puerto Rico, this challenge of energy and energy resiliency. Maria pointed that out to us, and it's one of the elements within the trust that we're concentrating on with the Resilient Business Innovation Program, where we're looking at creating that resiliency within the businesses. But first, we must make them aware of the problem or the challenges. And we begin to anticipate what that impact is going to be like so that we can go on to the next step, which is prepare to withstand. What do we need to do in terms of acquiring skills, acquiring the infrastructure, acquiring the tools to withstand however the challenge shows up to us? If it's through flooding, if it's through severe storms, or as we've seen it, although not connected to climate directly, but with the seismic events that we had in Puerto Rico in December of last year. All of that calls for us to build up on that resiliency. Then, of course, is what's our ability to recover from that, and how do we adapt or reposition ourselves? Those are the different stages or the different steps that we must take in building resiliency. The other element that we need to consider in resiliency are the types of resiliency. As always, there's the cultural or there's the institutional resiliency component that we all have to struggle with. Much of the change that needs to happen isn't well accepted or well received initially by the organizations or the infrastructures in which we work. So a lot of that is the fight back, what we have to go through, and the filters and the resistance that people have to accepting change. We know that there's one element that is constant, and that is change, but the cultural aspects of resiliency always drives us to ensuring that the organizations understand that that change must happen. From there, then, we begin the foundation of ethics, the principles, the governance, what everybody obeys or tries to follow in order to be more resilient. That turns into, and that translates into operational thinking. What are the networks? And you're seeing an extremely thought out and very, very deep presentation of the technologies and the commercial tools that are available for us in this climate change area, in the energy side, in this presentation today. So those are the networks that we're talking about. The mention has been made to former Senator and President of the Senate, Kenneth McClintock, who's here, who many years back during his tenure in government, he foresaw the need for the robust telecommunication systems. We are still struggling with that. His vision has been put into law. Now we need to get that into an operational mode. We've got to be able to also to deliver this message. And the message needs to hit home with the financial basis and the folks who are managing risk. And of course, the last element of this is the infrastructure that we need to begin to see come about. This is one example of how resiliency looked like. This is not a new topic for us. Mitigation efforts following Hurricane Georges in 1998, when I was very active in emergency management. You see some of the product that was done. In Puerto Rico, all of the facilities of the medical center have underground installation. And that's something that is achievable. Back in 1998, the total cost of this particular project, the Metropolitan Power Underground Loop, was $114 million. You've heard talk in these presentations of the amount of money that now Puerto Rico has available or accessible in order to accomplish this resiliency through burying a lot of the transmission lines. The next slide is not something that we're very proud of, and I'd like for us to see the very dramatic chronology of how the lights went out in Puerto Rico following Maria and how it took for 10 months for those lights to be restored. Memorable, but not endearing. And that reminds us that we must build the capacity to withstand, recover, and adapt our grid system. Human needs dictate that we become resilient in our electric grid. What you see there are over the 4,500 deaths witnessed because of the dependency of the island residents on life-sustaining equipment and the preservation of life maintenance medications. So we hope not to repeat this example again. For resilience to stay with us, we must make it a sustainable effort. I bring this slide to many of my presentations just to make people aware that there's a movement aloft at the United Nations. We've also mentioned the efforts of the United Nations. In 2015, there was a 15-year plan to adopt sustainable development goals. For Puerto Rico, and I've highlighted or made bigger the 5 sustainable development goals that impact this energy effort that we're all pushing forward. So we must make this island resilient. In order for us to make this island resilient, we have to count on vision. This is the 30-year vision for us, for a resilient Puerto Rico in 2015. 100% renewable energy, no carbon dioxide emissions, agricultural for self-sufficiency, building back better in those policies and practices, and sustainable conservation policies for our land, fresh water, and oceans. Above all, the strategic encouragement to select the technologies, the right technologies for growth. With that, the 30-year lifespan of Puerto Rico will be much happier. We will have a sustained, economically strong, and desirable place to live with families, work, and a place to retire. With that, I'm interested in introducing, and I'm happy to introduce Michelle Torres, who is the Business and Cooperative Program Director for the USDA Rural Division. She'll talk about the grants, as in the case of Student Aid and some other funding that's available from the federal government through the USDA.
Thank you, Gilberto, for that introduction. I want to take a moment to thank Douglas from Untitled Power for the invitation. I also want to thank each participant that's online connected and each presenter. The information has been excellent. We're definitely living and experiencing climate change, and we definitely have to work together to mitigate climate-related risk. Mitigation focuses on reducing atmospheric greenhouse gases, such as carbon dioxide, that causes this climate change. And USDA Rural Development, I'm actually at the Department of Rural Business Cooperative Service, and our mission is to enhance the quality of life for all rural Americans by providing leadership in building competitive businesses and sustainable cooperatives that can prosper in global marketplace. Today, we'll be talking about the Rural Energy for America program. What does this program do? What is their benefits? The times that each applicant may apply, and who can apply for these programs. Next slide, sorry. I'm going to continue into the slide. The next slide shows up on the screen. So I know time is limited. Basically, we're going to give a brief presentation of the program, and I know Doug can send out to you the presentation. You can reach out to our office for further information. So this program helps increase energy independence by increasing the private sector supply of renewable energy and decreasing the demand for energy through energy efficiency improvements. Over time, these investments can also help lower the cost of energy for small businesses and agriculture producers. Can someone can confirm that you hear me, and if the slide, we can move to the next slide. Oh, okay, thank you. Previous, it would be the previous one. Who may apply for this program?
Again.
Michelle, we can see the slides and hear you clearly.
Oh, thank you, Doug. Sorry for that. Okay, so basically who can apply for this program is agriculture producers with at least 50% of their gross income coming from agriculture operations. Also small businesses located in rural areas. And our definition for rural areas in our business program is different than other programs within USDA Rural Development. For this program, it could be a business located in any part of Puerto Rico except for 9 municipalities. The 9 municipalities that are not considered rural area are San Juan, Bayamón, Carolina, Trujillo Alto, Cataño, Guaynabo, Caguas, Ponce, and Mayagüez. So if you can identify a business that is interested in installing a renewable energy system or an energy efficiency project, this business owner or ag producer may apply for a grant or a guarantee loan or the combination of both. Eligible project costs include equipment, post-application construction and facility improvements, retrofitting, professional services, license, and permits. Also, a partial amount of working capital for guarantee loans only. All residential projects are not eligible for this program. This is basically for business owners, small business owners that are not in those 9 municipalities that we mentioned, or for ag producers. If your client is an ag producer, a farmer or rancher, the 9 municipalities requirement doesn't apply. Okay, so if the farmer is a hydroponic, for example, and is located in San Juan or Bayamón, they can apply if it's ag producer. Next slide, please. Okay. The grant assistance, the applicant may apply up to 25% of the total project cost. For renewable energy system, the minimum grant amount will be $2,500, which is the minimum, and the maximum is $500,000. But keep in mind that this grant is a 25% of the total project cost. As for energy efficiency, the minimum amount is $1,500, the minimum amount, and the maximum is $250,000, the maximum for energy efficiency. The systems that may be used for renewable energies such as biomass, geothermal, hydropower below 30 megawatts, hydrogen, small and large wind generation, small and large solar generation, ocean generation as well. Another option besides our grant, which is 25% of the total project cost, the borrower, the business owner, or the ag producer must identify or have a 75% of the total project cost. So this applicant must demonstrate matching funds. So if this business owner or ag producer does not count with the 75%, they can always go to a bank, a credit, or a credit union local and request that loan up to 75% of eligible project costs. The minimum loan amount will be $5,000 and the maximum will be $25 million. Okay. This program was under the new 1RD guarantee loan program. Funds may also be used for the purchase and installation of construction of energy efficiency improvements, such as high efficiency heating, ventilation, air conditioning systems, insulation, lighting, cooling, or refrigeration units, doors and windows, electric, solar, or gravity pumps for sprinkle pivots, switching from diesel to electric irrigation motor. Next slide. For the REAP grant, there's a funding application window. There's deadlines. So recently, our application up to $500,000, which was the max, closed March 31st, 2021. We also had a window for restricted funds for application of $20,000 or less. So if we're taking in consideration $20,000 application is because the total project cost is within $80,000 to $100,000, basically. Keeping in mind that the grant represents a 25% of the total project cost. Also, as a reminder, funds are competitive. So our next funding cycle for restricted funds will be in October 31st of 2021. For restricted funds, grants are $20,000 or less. So we're talking about small scale energy projects of approximately $80,000. If your project is over this amount, it will be for the next fiscal year, which will close in March 31st of 2022. Guaranteed loans are continuous application cycle throughout the year. Next slide, please. The REAP grant can be combined with state, local incentives, and also with guaranteed loans with credit unions or local banks. Next, please. Our regulation is 7 CFR 4280, and the next slide you'll see our contact information. Just wanted to thank you, Douglas, once again for this opportunity. It was brief, just an overview of the program. Once again, funds are competitive and we're in the process of scoring the applications. So we are looking forward and receiving more applications by October 31st. And thank you for this initiative.
Gracias, Michelle. Well done. So now we're going to begin our panel session. I really hope you can stay tuned a little bit longer. We've got some really, really great experts to kind of share how we as decarbonizers can try to help move things forward. So with that, I'm going to open up my first panel question to Kenneth. Kenneth, you've been at this probably longer than anybody. And I was just hoping maybe you could share your vision on how we can get behind and move forward as an island with regard to decarbonization, both short-term and long-term.
From here. Yeah. I think that you have to establish some major goals, and you have to approve bills, mostly to prohibit certain things. For example, I think that we have to create a pilot project in Vieques, and I would call it Vieques Verde. A few weeks ago, they were fighting because gas wasn't being unloaded in the ferries and all that. Well, why not come up with a real crazy idea? Effective in 3 years, stop shipping gas to Vieques. He said, well, how can you do that? Are you crazy? No. If you don't have combustion engines in Vieques, you might need maybe 10,000 gallons every month and a half or two. But you don't need gasoline anymore in Vieques. Except for some specialized tractor or something like that. But nothing else. Well, why don't we set that goal? Establish a program to provide incentives for people to be able to sell their current vehicles on the mainland of Puerto Rico, and that only electric vehicles are being used in Vieques by the next 3 years. Second, resurface every street, every road in Vieques, and raise it to autonomous vehicle standards, where a car can read the road that they're on. Because autonomous vehicles are driven more efficiently than by human fibers. There's no road rage. There's no excessive speed on a straightaway road. You know, all the things that waste gasoline do not operate in an autonomous vehicle. And if you start doing that and start taking advantage of the $4 billion that Biden is going to make available from offshore windmills, and I don't know if you're aware that between Vieques and mainland Puerto Rico, one reason why you can't have that super port that we're talking about in Rico Road 20 years ago, it's impossible because the average depth of the water here is 40 feet. But 40 feet is probably great to be able to anchor wind. So we should be taking advantage of those things and start with Vieques, was a pilot project, not 10 years down the road, in 3 years. And do it right in Vieques Verde, and then little by little, you'll see how that can be done simultaneously in the rest of Puerto Rico. So that's one thing that should be done. The other is, I can read my own handwriting. I have to mention, Iggy was talking about electric stations, charging stations. But he was a week behind the times when he said that. Because in the last week, I found out, and I actually sent an email, there already is one gas station in Puerto Rico, of all places, Burao, that invites you to go plug in and have a coffee. And it's not one of these DC whatevers that does it in 12 minutes. But at least you get a little charge while you're charging your nervous system with caffeine.
I went, it's not that bad. It's a low level free.
Yes.
11 kilowatts.
Well,
20 minutes of free energy. Better than 7, better than 9.
yeah. Every fence begins with one post.
Yeah.
And it's a great point. If you're not familiar, Vieques is a small island that's also part of Puerto Rico, so really it could be a great incubator. I want to introduce two other panelists, Isaac and Tom. They're both going to do a little brief introduction themselves, but what do you guys think of that idea and way we can kind of jumpstart things here?
Isaac, you want to start?
Sure, Tom. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Doug. It's a pleasure to be here today. My name is Isaac Panzarella. I'm here in Raleigh, North Carolina at NC State University, where I'm the assistant director at the North Carolina Clean Energy Technology Center. And I'm excited to be here today to share, a little bit of what we're doing here in North Carolina on clean energy. They just developed a clean energy plan to be carbon neutral by 2050. I also was involved last year in developing a report on offshore wind energy in North Carolina. So we have a lot to share, but more than anything, I'm here, and I'm sure Tom is also here to support you and to connect with you all. I've been to Puerto Rico a few times a couple of years ago in my work on combined heat and power for the Department of Energy. So I'm happy to be here. I love all the ideas that were talked about here. I think the challenge is to get started now and stop putting things off. But I think that there has been a lot of innovation already in Puerto Rico from what we're seeing in the microgrid and clean energy sector, and we just need to build on that. But more important than anything in that regards, I think, is to get training for people locally to be able to properly engineer, design, install, and maintain these systems, because that is just something that is going to be ongoing. And the good thing about it is it supports jobs in Puerto Rico.
This is Tom Bourgeois, and I am the Deputy Director at Pace University's Energy and Climate Center in New York. Like Isaac, I'm also involved in the U.S. Department of Energy's Combined Heat and Power, CHP program, Isaac actually has responsibility for Puerto Rico. My responsibility is New York and New Jersey. And prior to that, I did New York and the New England states before they changed it up. I've been listening in most of the day, joined a little after 10:30. This has been fascinating. We really appreciate you bringing us in. And I want to second what Isaac said in terms of, and Doug asked us to give this some thought, listening to the wide scope of what needs to be done. You know, the development of microgrids, solar, battery storage, specification, operations, optimized algorithms for resiliency. Clearly, there's a really important aspect of this that touches upon skills, that brings together worker training initiatives. Isaac mentioned his state in New York. Through our CLCPA, which has established targets of 70% renewable by 2030, 100% renewable electricity by 2040, and economy-wide carbon neutral by 2050. We have been allocating funds towards worker training. We found in New York State, for example, that businesses are saying we got a lot of need, but we need the workers. So I think that part of this, and due to the immense scope of what's being undertaken, this certainly does include drawing in curriculum, bringing in universities, community colleges, and even high schools and trade schools. We'd be happy to talk further about that and share information. And also, there was a little talk about microgrids and CHP. That has been our purview, combined heat and power. And we believe that high efficiency and resilient and smart use of natural gas through combined heat and power can certainly be a supplement to a smart plan in the transition period. So with that, I'll stop.
Thank you.
I'd like to round off the idea of the ECS. We've been looking at some of the installations that were left by the Navy, where a lot of the manufacturing capacity that we don't have now could be installed and provide worker development and workforce development for the residents of Vieques. In looking at it, the trust is engaged with one of the scientists that has created 52 worldwide franchises where they're refurbishing, they're rehabilitating hybrid electric car batteries. Those batteries don't have to be tossed, don't have to be pitched, but they can be rehabilitated. Vieques and all of the infrastructure that the Navy left could serve as a place where a lot of these workforce development efforts could take place. Interesting fact, the initial solar panel research that led us to the industry that it is today started in Santa Isabel with professors from the University of Puerto Rico and Mayagüez. So we had started that process already here in Puerto Rico, but we have forgotten. So we need to repeat our history and retake a lot of those efforts again in the factory.
Yeah, one other question I was hoping just to tee up, and again, anyone's able to contribute to this, is what is it that the average person or decarbonizer or small business can do this year to move us forward to the goal?
I want to bring a couple things up. First is where we come from. You know, back in Fuentes Fluviales, we had hydro, and we had a lot of hydro, and there wasn't an issue of the fight between the water authority, the power authority. We need to get back to that, and the beauty is that now we have a Puerto Rico Energy Bureau, which, you know, they're a big contributor. We have not even mentioned them here, but those 4 angels that are up in the Bureau, they really are doing a phenomenal job in order to move us and, you know, to step it up into this direction. And they have their hands full. But one of the things that they're looking at is pump storage. Because a lot of people are saying, well, we cannot waste the water. Fine, let's put a reservoir at the bottom of Caraizo and just let the water flow and generate energy and store that water. And during the day, when we have excess capacity of solar, pump it out again into Caraizo. We're not losing water, we're just using water as a battery. And the Puerto Rico Energy Bureau has been looking at this, and they're even looking at consulting to be able to bring that up to reality for the island, which is a phenomenal natural in sync with our habitat battery for the future. But we also have to think about what you're discussing regarding electric vehicles and transportation. Anybody that goes walking, bicycling, running, feel the heat when you go by cars, and imagine that being gone. You're gonna really make an impact out there. Just imagine taking that heat out of our environment and how good that will be to the planet and to all of us. And perhaps to try to erode a little bit the whole issue that we have of water rising, where we will have to remove our airport and what else. But you know, it's all to everybody. Again, I invite everyone to be part of the solution, stop being part of the problem. When you move to an electric vehicle, you're moving to a car that can drive you 200 miles at the minimum range now. The island is 100 by 35, so where are you gonna go? You know, most of the cars are moving to 350, 400 miles with one charge. So again, I invite you to be part of the solution. This could be in changing your lamps in your house and moving to LED, or putting a solar panel, or putting a solar water heater. Again, all of this stuff contributes. Become part of the solution, stop being part of the problem. And whether it's in transportation, or whether it's in conservation of energy, or whether it is in generation, do it. The key to our success, believe it or not, will be on storage. Storage will be what changes our planet, what changes this island. Because once we can store that energy, we're able to pretty much address it at any point in time, instead of having to have big power plants running all the time to utilize 20 or 30 or 40% of the capacity that they're generating. So I mean, all of this stuff is stuff that we can do now. We're doing it here, Glenn. We have 120 kilos. We have actually storage for the data center to run. We're charging all of our electric vehicles right now with the chargers from the sun. So we're trying to be an example. I'm happy to be an example to my children, which is the next generation. So that way they can actually carry the baton forward and have a better life than even what we had. And we haven't had a life, by the way. So I mean, these are just some of the points that people can do right away. And it's beautiful what you brought up regarding the grants. I mean, we have funding from the federal government that can actually assist and pay for a lot of that investments that corporations or even municipalities and other people have to do to be able to change our way of living.
Yeah, I'll add two other items that they can start doing right now. As one engineer said it in one of our presentations, the best energy you buy is the one that you don't use. So everybody at home must begin to look at how to save the consumption of energy. It's been said already, you know, the LEDs, every opportunity that you have to take a look at how you can reduce your footprint. That's going to reduce the decarbonization. The other element is how do we begin to support, call for, and augment the uses of free energy. The sun is free. And ask the question, I always, when I taught at the university, asked the students to ask themselves, would you prefer to pay $2.50 a gallon or have total free energy, no cost energy? So begin to promote through programs that are already in place from USDA. Right now, the CDBG-DI, the funding that's been made available, $300 million for resilient energy and water installations. $30 million of that is already out on the street. So people need to begin to look at how to access those funds to convert their homes into these alternative energy sources, be it photovoltaic or be it AI.
Below that, the average person is already changing the world, you know, roof by roof, house by house. It's happening. It's been happening for a while. It was accelerated definitely by the experience of the post-Maria blackout. But now we have, I mean, Puerto Rico has a very sophisticated, competitive market of companies that are out there, you know, getting systems in people's roofs and batteries in their garages. And if you look at Puerto Rico from space, and you look at the amount of flat roof space and impacted terrains in Puerto Rico, it's a huge potential power plant there that is growing every day. And so, you know, the elements are out there and they keep getting better, but the elements are out there. The policies are right and getting better. The funding is is there, and there's some policies that are funding, like you become a prosumer. You use and also you produce, and you give clean power to your neighbor, right? That is happening here where we are transmitting right now. And this is a Puerto Rican business here that is setting the example. I do it in my house, so it's happening. This is not far in the future. It's happening as we speak.
Tom?
Yeah. A point I'd like to make here is that I think, I have been listening hard most of the day, and I have heard some of this, but not a lot. One of the things, energy is a highly regulated market. It's not, it's not like making a software product and selling shrink-wrapped software into a mass market. You've got to work with the utility interconnection, local and state government, and so on. And part of the dialogue that I haven't heard here is, even if you've got some spectacular ideas, you've still got to work alongside a regulatory and a legal and administrative proceeding structure. So I think one of the things that we need to emphasize a little bit is creating the right kind of market structure, regulatory incentives that will really facilitate the development of clean energy markets. And, that happens day to day in administrative proceedings, before the board. That's one of the things that our group does, the PACE Energy and Climate Center. We started in 1987 to help the New York State Public Service Commission establish demand response programs and energy efficiency programs. So I would urge folks also to consider here the importance of the regulatory and legal and market structure and the right kinds of incentives, and paying attention to what's happening there before the board. It's so important. And then also there's local code citing and permitting, but I just wanted to get that out for people to think about.
That's a great point. I mean, there's two things that I'm kind of learning all the time, which is, number one, we have a legal system where you can make your own power from the sun or whatever choice you want to do. That's not true in the Caribbean. There's lots of places you can't do that. And demand response is a great example. This year will be our first demand response program that's kind of working its way through the government and the PREB, I guess. And these are exciting new changes that, again, I think we need to watch and pay attention so that these rules come out and they're impactful in a positive way.
Super relevant comment there. I mean, one of the things that many of us stakeholders were very involved is Act 17. And Act 17 sets a very specific mandate on automatic interconnection. So smaller systems, smaller defined as 25 kilowatts or below, residential or medium-sized commercial, you just put up into your roof and you put your battery in your garage, and the signature of your engineering professional or expert electrician is the permitting, and that's automatic. And then there's a 30-day mandate for net metering, which is the policy that allows you to get credit for the clean energy you export. Of course, we're not there yet. The mandate is 30 days for net metering. When I do break them, it's great. It took me 2 years to get net metering way back when in 2013. But now the average, and it's diplomacy working with PREPA, working via the regulator also, is around 100 days. And there's some anecdotal cases of weeks already. So things are getting better. And there's also mandates for faster interconnection of the larger systems. And there's a lot of work to do there. And definitely it's diplomacy at all scale, the regulator, the legislature, even the courts we try to get in to fight solar taxes.
But the beauty is what you said before, is the fact that you turn your solar system and you stop that meter during the day now. And you don't have to wait.
You get resilient that day.
You don't have to wait forever. You do it, you turn it on. The only thing you have to wait a month is for medición neta on the meter. That's it. But your system starts working.
And actually, you get some benefits on cost even without the metering, because you can cycle your battery and use more at that. So you get some savings and you get resiliency.
And you can put in some very basic rules. You can pass a law or have the government put an executive order prohibiting any government agency or any government employee to ask a natural or juridical person for any information that the government already has. For example, if they wanted to determine what is the insolation factor in the place where you want to install a solar farm, the authority has an insolation study of the whole island of Puerto Rico at least 8 or 10 years ago. That is information they have. They don't have to make you produce information that they already have. They want to know if you are up to date in payments to assuming that you have children that depend on you and don't live with you. They have that information. Let them send a message, an intra-agency messenger to get that information. They want to know if you have 5 tax returns filed. They can go to Hacienda and ask them for that. We should no longer be intra-agency messengers, not to get the information, but to delay granting us the license or certification or permit or whatever that they don't want to, for us to have pretty fast, so we can compete with the Autoridad de Energía Eléctrica, as we're already doing since we've had the net metering law. Every Puerto Rican and every company and every rooftop is a potential
and he did it in telecom, in the Telecom Act, if you want to do a telecom company in Puerto Rico, you just notify the regulator.
Yeah.
It's not like.
And it works.
Of course.
And PRTC lost some employees, but the industry probably has twice the employees now that it had then. And I'm told that pricing in telecom today in Puerto Rico is the lowest in the nation. So,
Another best practice, taking this one step further, financing and risk in the insurance company. This is a new paradigm. A lot of the banks and the cooperatives, all of the financial intermediaries are treating this as a consumer loan. If my installation is a $30,000, $45,000, $50,000, but that's not a consumer loan. Yeah, they equip it with a car. So when I go to finance, they'll give me the terms that a car financing would require, 5, maybe 6 years most. We're looking at a whole different hybrid type of finance. So we need to have better practices so that the financing is easier, so that we have APRs that are relatively competitive, so that we don't have, right now, the banks are not touching the major finance. Cooperatives are beginning to do that. So, and also the insurance. There's no insurance right now, there's no product of insurance that will cover any damages for rooftops or anything.
Let me push back on that. The companies like Summer and Sonoma and all the financing companies really come with a package that includes like anti-apocalypse insurance. So that's important for people to know that they can just stop thinking about their worries if they go with these companies. But for sure, financing is getting more and more sophisticated, and there's a space for local insurance to get into the.
But there's some of those deals that are kind of strange, where they come and they try to sell you on a used car that's going to cost more than a new car. So we got to be careful with a lot of these companies that are going outside selling, saying, oh, you sign this contract, we'll sell you the energy for the next 20 years at 23, 25 cents. You go, why? I'm paying 18. Well, but you have the insurance of the fact that your system will be working even when a hurricane comes around, right? So there's some iffy stuff there. Let me tell you something. If you actually want to install solar today, and this is the key factor, when we started this 10 years ago, the cost of the solar panel was, and I will never forget that, my first visit to those factories, was $5 a watt. Remember that number? $5 a watt 10 years ago. Today, it's 50 cents a watt. So that's why 10 years ago you needed subsidy. Because it was so expensive, the only way to do it was with some kind of subsidies from the government, local or federal. Today, at 50 cents per watt, it is the cheapest energy in the planet. Less than anything else available is solar. Now, we're seeing that same exact pattern happening in storage now. We did on Roche storage system back with the big solar plant that we did here. It was probably around 7 years ago or so, 6 years ago. It was megawatts of storage. Back then, that storage cost on lithium storage, it cost $1 million a megawatt. I'll never forget that because it was $1 million. 2 years ago, I checked on that number again. Lithium had gone down from 1 million a megawatt to $500,000 a megawatt. Today, it's $250,000 a megawatt. So look at the pattern that we're seeing on storage, which is the exact same pattern we saw on solar 10 years ago. So very soon, storage and solar is going to be mainstream. And with cooperativas bringing out funding to be able to accommodate this, it's a no-brainer, because at the end of the day, you're paying Prepa or Luma or whoever for energy. It's the same thing you'll be paying a cooperativa on a month-to-month. But in 3, 4, 5 years, system's yours. And from that day forward, you don't have to pay anybody, it's yours.
But you can still buy a gasoline vehicle because it's cheaper than maintaining the horse for your buggy.
So feeding grass to your horse is bad, yeah. I don't know.
Another call to innovation and technology as we look at all of these systems are fixed systems. Reality, when we look at business and commerce, we have a lot of smaller mom and pops that sustain this economy. What viable options do they have to install if they don't know the structure in which they operate? So that's the call from the trust, from us in making businesses resilient, coming up with these innovations where we have mobile type of systems that are alternative energy based. I mean, we have it in the fossil fuels, so the generators can be installed and can be moved about. If you relocate your business, you can relocate your generator, but not so in the case of alternative energy. That's what we're looking for, and we're trying to promote that type of invention or that type of innovation to come forward, because it will help solve many of our problems for the small businesses in Puerto Rico.
And remember, look what we were talking about a few minutes ago here in regards to the bi-directional electric vehicle chargers and that energy going back to the home. I mean, start thinking of the size of the capacity. You put 2 electric vehicles in your home and you have energy there for many days because that's serious storage on 4 wheels that you can actually move around with. So I mean, when you think of 90 or 100 kilowatt hours on 4 tires, that's a pack of energy. So this is going to be game changing as we come along. By the end of the year, this equipment will be mainstream as well. So I mean, understand that we're about to change the world.
Ignacio, I was fascinated by your presentation, but that brought to mind another thought that I'd like to share and get your feelings on. A lot of this vision can be impeded by or accelerated by, depending on how it works out, the kinds of investments that are being made in the T&D system. And I think one of the things you really need to ensure is that you get a DG amenable grid to capture the full value of all the stuff you're talking about. You know, with the interactive flows, you've got to have a DG amenable grid.
Tom,
yes.
Great point that you bring up, because the grid is critical, and a lot of people are actually saying, well, we don't need the grid anymore. We will always need the grid. I mean, the grid has to be there, and the grid has to be healthy in order to be able to transport that energy back and forward, whether it's from your vehicle to your home to another home, or your home to a business, or from a solar farm or a wind farm into your residence. I mean, it's a key. Having a healthy grid is critical. Now, something that's very different from Puerto Rico to everywhere else. We have $8 billion parked to the side here of federal funding from the damage of Hurricane Maria from FEMA to reconstruct a new grid. And that reconstruction begins this year. That has not started as of yet. So far, it's been 2.5 years of designing. And there's many consulting firms that have been working on this with Prepa, Luma, and the whole group to be able to put this thing forward. It is critical that that $8 billion be utilized correctly, because to your point, we need to make sure that that grid can absorb that bidirectional mobility and that can absorb all these multiple generations of different renewables into our new grid.
Absolutely, Ignacio. Great point. And one of the potential downfalls is that these are long-lived investments. So when they make that investment today, you're going to live with that from 2022 to 2050. They're going to they're going to depreciate that over 25 or 30 years. You want them to build a forward-looking capability. And you want them to set benchmarks that say, okay, how much penetration are you going to accept? Bidirectional flow. Make sure that that's set and make sure that those investments meet those benchmarks. Otherwise, the stuff they put in the ground in 2021, 2, and 3 that you're going to live with in the 2040s is not going to meet your needs.
Yeah, and there is a lot of work being done today, and I'm talking from the transmission side and the design to be able to hold 185 to 200 mile per hour sustained. So there's a lot of thinking around this. Also, the new substation designs to be able to make sure that the substations can withstand even the rising the locations for water. There's a lot of thinking that's going behind this to be able to build something that will last. So my blog, by the way, we have an event that's actually the ticker down at the bottom called Energy 2021 that will happen in November. I invite all of you to join us because that's going to be a huge event where we'll talk about all of this technology as well as all the things that have already gone along the way to put us where we need to be with a new grid and new renewable challenges and goals.
Going back to the individual, I just bought 3 weeks ago, Iggy mentioned I bought a car 3 weeks ago that's plug-in and hybrid. But it was, as Iggy was saying before, there's elements that are iffy. Iggy talked about iffy. And it was iffy for me whether I would buy a plug-in car living in a condominium building that doesn't have chargers and working in a building that doesn't have chargers. One of the things that we have to do if we want to decarbonize Puerto Rico, the government of Puerto Rico has to immediately start changing the building codes to require that the design of new condominium buildings and new parking facilities in those buildings and office buildings or independent parking garages have chargers initially, or at least have the infrastructure in at least one parking space per apartment, and one parking space for every 500 or 1,000 square feet or whatever, that can be connected to a communal or an individual charger, because eventually you're going to need that. And nothing better than to charge your car while it's parked all day at the office or while it's parked all night at home. And so those are things that we have to do. But the regulatory work has to be done now. Because if we don't require that now, this year in designs, buildings that are going to be built in 2 years and sold in 3 will not be equipped for this new technology.
And remember, one of the things that's critical, Kenneth, is we've been at this, Glenn has been at this 54 years. We've been working with PREPA hand in hand for 54 years, supplying from cables, towers, substations, transformers. This is our world. And we understand the depth of this whole thing. It's not putting just a charging station, plugging 12 THHA cable and go. There's a lot of thinking that goes behind it to make sure that that works, because that's a lot of energy. Or if you're thinking of 350 kilos, think of the size of a generator, 350 kilos to be able to charge one vehicle. Yes, it's going to be fast to charge very fast, 8 to 10 minutes, but there's a lot of power and a lot of transformation of energy that happens in the back end. So I mean, it's critical that we understand that there is a lot of thinking that has to happen, from consulting to the new grid that's being built, to everything that we are doing has to be a holistic approach. And I tell you, I think we're blessed into the fact that we have people like yourself, Ed, also people like Larry Sahammer and Risi, and all the other people that are in the administration that are pushing for this, because they understand the importance of it all for our sustainability, for our life. So,
well, with that, again, we're a little over time. We appreciate everybody's patience. Isaac, Tom, we hope you can join us for future events, collaboration.
Before we go, I want to thank Marianne de Aro. Marianne has done an incredible job putting this whole thing together. And Ricky Rios, our IT director, the international IT director, as well as Marianne de Aro, the marketing manager. These people have done an incredible work to put this whole thing together. So thank you so much to both of you for your work.
Well, thanks again. Really appreciate it. Tell your friends about this event. You can watch it on demand on your favorito device probably in a day or two. So thank you very much.
Thank you all. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Cheers, everyone.
Bye.